Welcome to the module on editing. And this is a topic that nobody really likes, no writer enjoys it, but is absolutely one of the most effective ways to make your copy go from pretty good to absolutely amazing. And it's also one of the most underutilized places for changing low converting copy into high converting copy. So please pay attention to this module and use the techniques that we talk about here. This is one of the quotes that I personally live by. Don't practice until you get it right. Practice until you never get it wrong. The reason I say that is when you are editing, you're not looking to just do one thing and then put it out. You're working to get it absolutely right as best as you can. By going over your copy that you write for something or the script that you've done for something a few extra times, you make it exponentially better than the first time that you did it. So make sure to take this to heart. First off, I'm going to discuss a concept called rapid editing. Rapid editing is what you do when you don't have that much time before you have to put out the sales copy, or if it's not a piece of copy that is absolutely critical to your success as a business and instead is more of an ancillary piece of copy or a smaller piece of copy or something like an email that you send out every day or a social media post, those sorts of things. This is not for use when you are trying to create a very powerful, long-lasting piece of copy, such as a webinar or a video sales letter, but for the everyday kind of copy for the smaller types of jobs or for the jobs that need to get out really quick for some reason, use this method. There's only 4 parts to the rapid editing checklist. Each one of them is important, so please use each piece. The first one is to use a website called the Hemingway app. Now, there's a very specific thing that you use this website for. You take the copy that you've written or the script that you have, maybe even the transcript of a video that you recorded, and you upload it into the website. What this is going to do is show you several different factors and parts of your message. It's going to not only give you the size of the paragraphs and the difficulty of the reading level, but it's also going to show you what words might be in different spots. It's going to show you a lot of really good information that most editing softwares don't show you. The most important part of the Hemingway app is the reading level of your copy. What you want to do is attempt to get whatever copy you've written or whatever copy you've transcribed from a video down to below a 6th grade reading level. The reason I say that is not because you want to insult your reader's intelligence, but actually, when a person is reading or listening to copy, they listen easiest and they understand best when the copy is at a lower grade reading level. This is true of people who haven't graduated high school, and it's true of multi-doctoral people. You have to remember, every time someone is encountering one of your ads, they are not encountering it willingly. It's being thrust upon them in some way, shape, or form. And so the easier it is for them to comprehend, the more effective it's going to be. So don't take it as a knock that your copy is at a low reading level. That's actually a very good thing. Some of the best ads that ever ran were run at a 3rd or 4th grade reading level. So get it below the 6th grade if you can, and then don't worry about it being even lower if you can get it that way as well. Hemingway app will show you the ways to do that, either by breaking up paragraphs, reducing the complexity of sentences, showing you where the grammar can be improved or reduced, things like that. The second thing is to use an app called Grammarly. And Grammarly shows you the errors in typical writing, the errors in typical syntax, so that your copy is easier to read on the page. Something to just use. You can even install it on your browser. So if you type using the internet or if you type using a word processing platform, then it's going to immediately give you feedback on where the grammar's at with your writing. This is more effective for written rather than verbal because we communicate differently verbally than we do when we write. But for written copy, you want to just make sure that it's absolutely clear and that your grammar and syntax isn't a stumbling block for people trying to comprehend it. The third thing is one of the most important things that I do with every single piece of my copy, and that's called the voice test. There's a couple different types of voice tests. The first one is where you simply read through the copy that you've written out loud. This is the first pass. So if you're reading the initial script that you wrote or the Facebook post that you wrote, you really want to read through that out loud to see where you trip up. The reason for this is most human beings will read something in a sub-vocalization pattern. What that means is they are reading it to themselves underneath their breath. They might not be moving their lips, but some people you can even see move their lips as they read books or newspapers. This subvocalization is how they process the information, which means if your copy doesn't read well spoken out loud, it's not going to be received well when it's read in someone's mind. Do this first test of just an initial pass of reading it out loud to see how complex or simple or clear your word choice is and the way that you've organized your arguments or the things that come up as you're reading it out loud to yourself. The next voice test is to read it out loud as if you were presenting it to your target market. Now, this is different from the first voice test. The first one is just you trying to read it and see if you can trip over it. Or not. And if you don't trip over it, move on to the next one. When you're reading it out loud as if you're presenting it, you're going to very quickly see the points that might be boring to an audience, that might need more explanation as you're reading it out loud. You may even notice that during the time you read it out loud as if it were a presentation, you want to add more to the copy somewhere. You might want to add extra explanation to something or extra oomph to a specific statement. Reading it out loud as if you're presenting it is going to give you a different perspective on the copy that you've written, and it helps connect the way you've written something to the way it's going to be received with the audience. The last thing to do for rapid editing, and this is going through this process as quickly as possible. The Hemingway app is a download, the Grammarly is an install, and both of those tools right now are free. They may have some paid options if you want them, but they're free to use. The voice test is free. This last one is also free. All you have to do is Google the 21-step sales letter, and then take that template and review it against your sales copy. Just do a really quick check on whether or not you've included some key points of a sales letter in your piece of copy, regardless of whatever that copy is. So for example, if you've written something for Facebook and you realize after doing the quick check that you forgot a call to action in the middle, or maybe you've forgotten proof elements at certain points, that checklist is going to give you a really quick way of seeing if your copy could be punched up in any way before it gets sent out. So try the Hemingway app, definitely install Grammarly, absolutely 100% every single time use the voice tests for all of your copy, and then finally at the end use the 21-step sales letter to quick check on whether or not you've hit the important parts of every sales message. Now, 90% of the time when you are writing copy, this is all you're going to need. The rapid editing method is a really great way to make sure that what you've written is clear and concise and will actually contribute to the bottom line or get the outcome that you want from that piece of copy. However, like most things, there will be times where you have to go through a very thorough process of editing, and I want to give you a framework to do that so that you get the absolute best out of that process. Most people never think about this, and one of the resources I'm going to recommend is a fantastic book written by a friend of mine named Bond Halbert. This is the thorough editing part of the module. Use this when it's a very important piece of copy that you are creating to last a long time in your business or something that matters for a client of yours. The thorough editing checklist has 4 different parts. They are extracted from my friend Bond Halbert's book, which I absolutely want you to go buy right now on Amazon. It's called The Halbert Copywriting Method Part 3. It's either $10 on Kindle or I believe $17 or $18 if you want to buy a physical copy. This is the absolute resource on editing copywriting, made by the son of one of the greatest copywriters that ever lived. I'll go through each piece with some examples, but absolutely go buy this book right now. So part 1 is formatting. The reason we start with formatting is the reason most people bounce off of written copy, regardless of where it is being written, is because they can't read it or because it's hard to read. You want to make sure before anything else that your copy is readable, because once it's readable, then they can actually consume the words and the choices of ideas that you've put up there. The best way to do that is to start with eye relief. When you're scanning down a page, either digital or physical, there's certain types of ways that make it easier to read on the eyes. One of those is to just make sure that the font style that you've chosen or anything like that is not really jarring, or maybe the type of color of the page that you've used, or the way that the font text goes on the color of the page. Just making sure that it's not contrasty or harsh on the eyes is something that is very difficult to bring up. The next thing is breaking up paragraphs. Long paragraphs, thick paragraphs are very difficult for people to read through. They are only going to do that if they are absolutely entranced with every word that you're saying, which is not common for advertising. Break those paragraphs up, make them simple, make them shorter, make them punchier. Even break up sentences if you can. When you're talking out loud, when you do the voice test for rapid editing, naturally you're going to pause and break things up. Naturally, you're going to add ums and ahs, or you're going to add transitions and things like that. So break up the paragraphs and the sentences in the same way, especially on written formats, especially online, or if you're writing for some sort of mobile device. The next way is punctuation. Punctuation in copywriting is used to either halt or continue people through the piece. So you'll notice in a lot of good copywriting, people use ellipses, the dot, 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 in order to drag people down the page rather than using a period or rather than using something else that stops them from reading. Ellipses help drag people down. The parentheses let you separate one thought from another, but still keep people's attention. And then when you're using all of those types of punctuation, you can also use them in the opposite way. If you want people to stop and focus on something you just read, throw a period, throw an explanation point. But keep in mind, you're using punctuation in a very active sense to make sure the reader is participating in your writing in the way you want them to participate. If you want to stop them and make them focus, throw a period. If you want them to drag down the page, then throw up some ellipses so that they keep going. The next way to do that is with fonts. So by keeping someone's attention, you can either change up the font on the page, you can make sure that the font is extremely readable on that format. A quick Google search will show you what fonts tend to do better on certain mediums. So for example, mobile devices might require a different font due to the size of the screen than a desktop, or a written ad in a magazine might be different than a newspaper, things like that. Just real quick matching of the native medium, but also making it easy to read is something that you should go through while you're thoroughly editing. This next part is formatting. So not only with breaking up paragraphs and sentences, but just in general, breaking up your piece of writing so that people can see there's a format, there's a structure, and also lead to some anticipation. For example, if you write something that says part 1 or part 2, people will naturally be anticipating the next few parts. And so they can sit there and appreciate what they're currently going through by knowing that it will eventually go to another thing. You can do this with centering of titles. You can do this with different types of subheads. There's lots of ways to format that tell people there's more to the copy and that they need to keep going. That's just formatting. That's making sure that the piece is easy to read, is exciting to read, and doesn't make it difficult for the reader or the listener or the viewer to actively consume the content. Once we finish formatting, we move on to part 2, which is clarity. There's a couple key ways to make your writing more clear. One of those ways is called that hunting. If you're on a digital platform, you're using a word processor, you can simply use Control F on either a Mac or a Windows and look for the word that. When we're using the word that, especially if we're writing quickly, it's usually used in a superfluous way. And there's other ways that you can make the statement that you made more clear. 90% of the time, the word that can either be replaced with the word with, or it can be completely rewritten to not need that word, and it would be a more active, engaging way of writing. So just Control F, search for the word that, and every time you find it, reread that sentence to yourself and see if you can write it in a way that is more engaging, that is more active, instead of using the word that will allow you to let the rest of the sentence happen. We do it faster because we use it a lot when we're verbally speaking, but when we're writing, it does kind of slow things down or it makes things more monotonous. So definitely use the Control F and search for that. The next thing is to search for big words. You can go back to the Hemingway app and start looking for big words when you copy and paste your stuff into that app, because it's going to point them out. It's going to say this word is causing your reading level to go up, or this word is big, multiple syllables, whatever. The reason we do that is to not only lower the reading level of your piece, but also show that we are understanding and empathetic with a person who's choosing to spend their time reading this advertisement instead of whatever thing they were doing beforehand. By using big words, it doesn't make you sound smarter necessarily. There is one caveat to that I'll talk about in just a minute. But usually it just means we're trying to sound smart. And that's not a way to build, that's not a way to build trust or empathy with your reader. Look around, look for big words, especially using the Hemingway app, and see if you could use a more simple, more active word for that. The third way